Very difficult to tell. Okay, hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Today is Monday, May 18th, 2020. And thank you for joining me today. If you're watching live, if this is the first time you're watching me, or if you're watching live on replay, comment below. Let me know where you are located. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you? I'm currently in Thailand, and it's 11:14. Starting a little late today. Forgive me for that. Let's see. Today we're going to talk about design. Now, design is it's a very interesting topic. Most people who like to draw, don't really think of design too much. They don't really understand its importance. But I would argue, without good design, no one's going to want to look at your drawing. It's it's a very crude way, but design is what attracts people to your work. Even if you're just like to do little pencil drawings, design is what attracts people to your work initially, because it's the emotional response. And I think that is what really our goal is as artists, is to get an emotional response. I should probably put something else on. And without that, in a world full of stimulus, we can never get a viewer to stop and appreciate what we do. Even if you have the best drawing and marks, it's design that gets someone to say, hey, let me give you a chance. And, I would argue, in my philosophy as an artist, is to always to try to grab the viewer's attention, and try to hold them in your picture. And I think we all want that. We all want people to appreciate our pictures, whether they're drawings or paintings, sketches in our sketchbook, watercolors, movie poster art, whatever we want. We want people to stop and appreciate what we do. And for me, design is something that I have never formally trained. I've been formally trained in drawing and painting, but never formally trained in design. I don't have a graphic design degree or anything like that. But, admittedly, it's something that I've always known. So I've never really put much thought into it. It's something I've always known and understood and could do. And I think part of it is, I can't explain. It's something intuitively. It's a sense that I have. But as I got older, I started to examine it and study it, on my own, informally, I guess, through books and from other great artists. And so that's what I'm going to attempt to do today. What I would like to do is, today I'll talk about some of the ways that I look at design, the way that I look at composition. In design, another way to talk about design is composition. And the way that I can simplify design, because it's an incredibly complex thing, or it can be. It can be very complex. So that's my goal. Let's try to simplify it for you, and maybe give you a couple ways where you can start to use design, or look at design in a different way, and maybe ways that you can help improve your own design. So let's talk about first some principle. Well, let me quickly. So I'm going to periodically break for questions. Just want to quickly check out the chat. Hello, Dutch, I believe. Hello. Lucas. Hello, Lucas. Hello from Virginia. 12 in the afternoon. Okay, perfect. Oh, hello, Pavel from Mexico and Alex from Toronto. Carlos from Brazil. Wow. India. 9:45. Great. Barcelona. Oh, it's so great to see. Thank you for joining me live today. Yeah, I'm very happy with the response. I know it's such a popular topic, but it's I've always hinted at it, but I've never, really organized a proper lesson. It's very, very important. Okay, what are we going to do today? Let's look at principles first. Now, there's lots of design principles, and there's lots of ways we can approach design. But we'll start with 3. I like to, simplify things. I think for me, in all the different ways you can break down design, the first thing that I look at is these 3 principles. So the first principle is the principle of asymmetry. Asymmetry meaning is something, symmetrical means it's even, right? Both sides are even, left to right, top to bottom in a picture. And generally, we don't want that. As a general rule, we don't want that. We have a character here, character here. I think we could all look at this crude composition and go, man, that is too symmetrical. It's very flat. It instantly is like, it's almost repelling. Asymmetrical. Now, there's a time and place for symmetry, and there's a range of asymmetry that we can use, but that's just something that I look for right away. And I think we all, as artists, we all look at images or photography. We all want to see some kind of asymmetry. So that's number 1, asymmetry. The second is contrast. Now, contrast, there's lots of ways to achieve contrast. Lots of ways to think about contrast. There's contrast of shape. There's contrast of line. There's contrast of value. Value is very important. We're not going to so much talk about value today. Today we're going to focus more on linear composition. And then there's contrast of edge and contrast of scale. So many ways that we can approach this problem. So for example, contrast of shape. So let's say we have an horizon, we have a mountain, which are generally triangular. And then one way to give this crude basic composition some nice contrast is to put a curve, maybe a lake, maybe a curved road, something like that. Nice contrast there. Very crude. Another way to think of contrast is straights versus curve. Let's say you have a beautiful city, an urban kind of thing. Maybe you can frame a statue of, let's say it's Atlas or holding a globe. So there's a contrast of shape and then scale, contrast of scale. So we have one big thing. This is something I talk about quite a lot, big, medium, small. That's the principle of contrast of scale. You have a medium-sized thing and a couple of little things scattered about. That always looks nice. Contrast of scale. So just a couple different examples there, very crude examples. And the last principle that's important to me is eye flow. And eye flow is basically how you lead the viewer's eye from in and through your image, around your image. We all know of things like focal points. Generally, every image should have a nice, clear focal point, and it should have also supporting focal points. So typically, a good rule of thumb is to use 3 focal points, one being number 1 most dominant, and focal point number 2 and 3. And then we use things like compositional elements, building blocks, to move our viewer's eyes. So we use things like line, we use things like contrast, we use things like edge, we use things like texture, we use highlights and things like that. So highlight would be a contrast in value. Let me just quickly pull up one of the greatest of all time. Let's just pull up a Rembrandt portrait here and see if, even in a simple portrait, does Rembrandt have eye flow. Here's one, he's very famous self-portrait. Okay, so we can all see, we'll go full screen here. So eye flow. So we can all see it's a very simple composition, not much to it, right? It's just it's basically a portrait with a background. So comment below, what do you think is focal point number 1? What's focal point number 2? And what would focal point number 3 is? So comment below, what's focal point number 1? This is pretty obvious in any portrait. Okay, it's for sure the eye. We all know that. I think we all watching know that. What's number 2? Number 2, I would argue, is the hand. Generally in realistic art, painting and illustration, you know, the head and the hands is what the human eye gravitate towards. Now, here's a tricky one. What's focal point number 3? Or is there even focal point number 3? Is there a third place that Rembrandt wants you to look here? Well, I would argue, if I zoom in, now this is a small photograph of the original. I would speculate, I would get in real life that there is some reason why he wants you to look here. I think he could have easily left this area totally black. He put lots of detail for a reason. There's lots of detail. And I would argue there's very nice paint handling here. If we saw the original, I bet you this area has some beautiful, beautiful paint handling. Probably has very thick paint. So focal point 1, 2, and 3, right? Now eye flow is how do we lead the viewer's eye from 1 to 2 to 3, and how do we keep our viewer engaged in our picture? So a focal point eye is number 1. So we all as human beings will look directly into the eye. So you don't need to force the viewer here. We'll naturally go here. Now, how do we get from 1 to 2? How do we get from the eye to the hand? What are some ways? Does he use line? Does he use shape? Well, he clearly has lots of line. In fact, there's a visible arrow right here. There's a nice contrast here, and it's a rectangle. Yeah, there's a clear line here. So there's a clear push diagonally down from the face down to the hand. So lots of different ways. Let's just take line, for example. Linearly, he uses line here. Doop. There's a clear line. You see that little highlight right there? That's not an accident. That little highlight's not an accident. Line straight to number 2. Okay, so now we're like, okay, well, we're at number 2, but if you notice, number 2 is not drawn very well, right? There's no knuckle, there's no fingers, there's not much detail. So we're kind of like, oh crap. Well, as a viewer, you may feel disappointed. You may be like, well, you told me to look here, but now what? Well, if you notice here, he uses compositional tools, compositional constructs again, to bring you back to the shoulder. And one way he does it is with line and shape. Here's a clear arrow shape. You see that? That is a visible arrow. There's 2 here. It's arrow number 1. There's arrow number 2. So he's saying, okay, come down to my hand and then quickly go to the left. It's another visible arrow. I just caught that. He is forcing you to go left. He's saying, hey, don't hang out at the hand. Stop at the hand and then come back. That's eye flow. You see that? Eye flow, eye flow, eye flow. He's forcing you to move left. And then there's other tools here that lead you to the hand. There's a clear arrow. I just saw this. You see that? See the shape of this highlight? Clear arrow. I don't think that's an accident. Also, this curve is called a boundary. It's a boundary, right? The eye can wander out into the picture, but whoop, he leads you back up to the shoulder. And the shoulder, look at this, another arrow. He's saying, all right, you stopped at my shoulder, thank you. Now come back to my face. And then we could do this for days. In any great work of art, this is there. So this is just a quick proof of example of eye flow by one of the greats of all time. So and there are way more design principles. But this is how we're going to start our conversation today. We're going to look at asymmetry. We're going to look at contrast in its various forms, and we're going to look at eye flow. All right. Let me excuse me. I'm going to grab a drink here and check out the questions. Oh, someone said shoulder. Nemanja said shoulder, yes. White area in the chest, yes. Hello from Croatia. Oh, hello Canada, Barcelona. Wow. Let's see. It's like a bird. Interesting. Oh, Samiha asked a good question. Well, Samiha asked, is digital can enjoy benefit from both? I don't see a difference. I think it's like saying, can a watercolorist and a gouache artist use composition? It's just a tool. You're describing tools, but what I'm talking about is the general picture making. No matter what tool, you're going to need good composition. So, thank you for your comments there. I'm gonna stop at the end for some questions here, but let's quickly go back to. So now we know some. We have some things to look at now. Now let's look at some ways that we can use asymmetry, contrast, and eye flow. And I call these building blocks. Building blocks. They're basically little tools, little building blocks that we have to construct our pictures, to make asymmetrical compositions, to add contrast, and to move the eye around. Now, one of my favorite building blocks is geometry, basically squares, circles, triangles, right? Squares, circles, and triangles. Geometric shapes. Now, we talked about the importance of, I misspelled asymmetry. The importance of asymmetry, an asymmetrical geometry, an asymmetrical square, and an asymmetrical circle is an oval. So in composition, that's why rectangles are so commonly used, is because they're asymmetrical in nature. So keep that in mind, is that when you're composing, you generally want to put things into rectangles. You generally want them to be more oval versus perfectly spherical, perfectly symmetrical circles. Lines come in, there's many ways you can use line, but I like to think of line as either straight or curved. And curves can be C's or S's. S's are basically 2C curves. But to me, the important thing to keep in mind of line, for me, the number one way that I use line is, yes, I use curved lines, I use straight lines, yes. But for me, the number one thing that I ask myself when I compose pictures is that, is my line are my lines perpendicular, right? Are they perpendicular? Create incredible drama and tension and action. They're incredibly attractive. They're incredibly eye-catching. So you can draw curves and diagonals too. So for me, line is not so much about straight or curved. It's more about, is it perpendicular or diagonal? Now, there's a time and place for both. There's definitely use. There is use for perpendicular or perfectly horizontal, perfectly vertical, perfectly horizontal. There is a time use to great effect as well. So again, it comes back to the balance and the asymmetry. Okay, so those are the two main tools. Let's just quickly look at some examples of line. I I have I found this diagram of this wonderful book. This is Loomis Creative Illustration. Comment below if you have seen this book, or maybe you have this book. I believe it's out of. I believe this book is currently out of print. You can only find it in. Well, I have a PDF of it here. Just wanted to show you this real quick. How beautiful, simple, linear composition can work. Here's another example. Oops. See, these are curves, but you know, I in my mind's eye, you know, I see this. I see a straight. I see the. Now this curve has an angle, right? This curve. If we try to like the mathematical term. Comment below if you know the math term where you straighten a curve. You take the degrees and, oh my God, it's been a long time. This curve to me, my mind's eye computes it as a straight. 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 Curves for me is more about as a use of contrast. So that's Andrew Loomis there. So basically, when I'm, you know, putting together images, illustrations, or even portraits and things like that, the three questions that I ask are: is it symmetrical? Is it symmetrical? A better way to ask: is it too symmetrical? If it's too symmetrical, we know that, as we've seen, that it can get right. If it's then it can get quite boring and even repulsive. People will not, they may not even want, they'll get offended by it. It's just like, so, oh, it's very jarring if it's too symmetrical. Second question is there enough contrast that I need to do what? Main tool, contrast for me is a tool of eye flow. And eye flow meaning has some kind of logic. So what we're going to do now is let's just take a look at some examples. And this is a great way to make your composition better, is to look at other great composers. You know, I have my own list of people that I constantly look to. And one thing that I always recommend, and we'll get more into this in tomorrow when we talk about exercises. One thing I always recommend is look for artists who are obvious. Look for artists, look for photographers, look for scenes. Maybe you're walking around your neighborhood or your city, or you live in nature and you're looking at compositions. Look for things that are obvious, meaning that they're clearly designed in, you know, obvious geometric shapes. They have very clear value contrast. They have very clear straights versus curves. So look for designs and things that are obvious. And one of the artists who is a very good example of this, Edgar Payne. Edgar Payne is an American painter famous for landscapes. And if you clearly just look through this, you can clearly see. Um, I mean, there's no denying that he's used very obvious geometric shape, geometric line, very simple, very basic. Let's start with this one. This one is a very famous Payne. And if you have composers or great artists that you like who do excellent composition, comment below. Let's all share our collected knowledge. I'm going to turn my webcam on. Okay. So when I look at, so the three question I ask is it asymmetrical? Is there contrast? And is there nice eye flow? Now, one way for me to judge asymmetry is to go back to one of our building blocks, which is geometry. Now, for me, I have a very, one of the things that I developed the older I get, as I mature as an artist, is a respect for geometry, meaning like the ability to form things into basically rectangles, spherical things, rectangles and circles, specifically the rectangle. So I'm always, in my mind, I'm always forcing compositions into rectangles whenever I come. And I'm always looking when I look and study composition. So let's start with geometry. What is the obvious geometry here? Comment below. What is some obvious geometry? And geometry is either, right, asymmetrical geometry is either, there's obvious triangle here too, right, mountain. Right, we can clearly see a triangle. And he doesn't, that's no mystery. He makes it very obvious. He's like, hey, this is an abstract geometric design. Take it or leave it. 9 out of 10 people will look at this and will come because well, maybe not 9 out, you know what I mean. Most people who are glass painting will stop and be like, oh, wow, something about it makes me want to stop. And in that sense, I think he succeeded. Now you could argue this is also a triangle. Here's one here. But for me, I see a rectangle. In this case, it's a trapezoid, I believe is the term. When you take a rectangle and you taper, I believe it's a trapezoid. So this to me is sort of a trapezoidal thing. So that's the obvious, right? And that's what's so good about Edgar Payne is that he doesn't hide it. So as you know, I always recommend it to someone who wants to learn composition, Edgar Payne, because he doesn't hide it. Let's look at another great composer that doesn't hide their geometry is I'm looking for Cornwell, Dean Cornwell. Okay, here we go. Some of these are just clearly oh, I guess I don't have it in this folder. I thought I did. He has one in particular, which is, well, several of his compositions are clearly rectangular. Oh, maybe I can find it online. Look at this. Wow. There's a clear rectangle straight in the middle. Is that a Cornwell? I'm not sure. Okay, this one is a good example. Oh my goodness, running out of time again. Okay, let's look. Clear geometry. Let's look for asymmetry, and let's look for eye flow. Okay, so really obvious geometry is this beautiful. I mean, this is almost entirely drawn as rectangles. This is not quite the one I had in mind, but it's a very good example. That line on the floor. He breaks it up here, but that line is so strong, it can almost literally cut this composition in half. So there's one. Look at this. There's an angle here, so that's to me, this angle is a line, which is an arrow. That's another clear rectangle, so it's a square. Even these, floor pattern. It's basically a rectangle turned at an angle. This box, what is this piece of furniture here? Her dresser, her vanity, I believe it's called. Piece of furniture. Look at this, clear rectangle here. He even makes the perspective line so subtle. Clear rectangle here. Clear rectangle here. So this is an example where he's like, you know what? This picture is basically a rectangle. Take it or leave it. I am not going to hide. I am going to force you into a rectangular world. So one way you can, if you're just starting and you're still kind of, still having, still practicing composition and still having, a little difficulty, I would try to make hard rectangular compositions like this. Try to force yourself to use 80-90% rectangles in the image, or use or maybe just limit yourself to three big rectangles, something like that. And we'll talk about more about that in later episodes, how to compose with these different construction tools. So beautiful use of rectangles there. So he's saying, all right, well, he's built for us a rectangular world. Now, is this picture asymmetrical? You can see, right, this picture basically is cut in half, almost exactly at the middle. Now, we all know that's a no-no, right? Anyone who's taken basic art class knows you don't do that. You don't cut your picture down in half. He's even done it twice. He's done it twice. He's like, he put that corner of the wall there. You see that? He did it twice. He basically cut his picture in half. Now, it's not quite nearly half, but it's close. Right? That's a big no-no. And look at the convergence. Oh, that's implied line. I forgot to mention that earlier. Implied. The line from this horizontal line breaks up, but it picks up here and it picks up here. So that's an implied vroom. That's an implied straight. That's how I can see a perfectly straight line through this image. Now, remember, rectangles are generally more attractive because they're asymmetrical than squares, and ovals are more attractive than circles because they're asymmetrical. Does asymmetrical circles or ovals in this picture? Right? Here we go. Bada boom. Bada boom. Look at that. You think that's an accident? These mirrors are ovals. He could have easily made rectangle mirrors and been like, boom, boom, hit you over the head with rectangles. This is no accident. This is clear use of design. And this creates asymmetry. This creates asymmetry because notice he doesn't put any here. No ovals here. But he puts two here. And what that does is it creates this huge like this. It basically creates an angle, a visual angle. If this was a seesaw, this side has two ovals, this side has zero. So it's like, woo. So it creates powerful balance. So there's an example of rectangles and ovals and asymmetry. Now, is there another example of linear contrast? Now, there's clear value contrast. Is there another example of linear contrast? Okay, he gave us some ovals. Does he give us any triangles? Below, if you see some triangles. I think we could all see triangles. So comment below, what is the most obvious in this picture? There's one very, very obvious triangle. Comment below. Do you see it? I know you see it. We all see it. Boom. Look at that. Look at that. That is no accident. Another subtle one here. Boom. Boom. Look at that. Look at that gorgeous of counterbalance. That's another principle I forgot to talk about. Counterbalance and asymmetry only works if you have counterbalance. So I totally forgot to mention that earlier. But do you guys see that? How he uses the very simple constructs. You know, this is no mystery that this composition is what it is. It's no mystery. It's built on rectangles with subtle hints of boop, 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 of triangles and ovals. Now, one more. Let's talk about eye flow. Where is my eye flow? Where's my eye flow? What's focal point 1? Now, let's comment below. What is focal point 1? Now, we know earlier from the Rembrandt that human beings' faces are very powerful focal points, natural focal points. So, right? So let's all take a look at this image. Let's all take a minute, look at this image. What's focal point? What's focal point 2? And what's focal point 3? Comment below. What do you see? You know, when I first glanced at this, I saw the man's head. At second glance, I quickly saw the female's head. His head is to the side, right? But because he's built it with such powerful shape contrast and value, he's like the brightest white here next to this window. My eye quickly went to him. So this is interesting. So, okay, we can all clearly agree that this is 1 or 2, right? It could be either way, depending on where you look at it. You can make an argument that she's focal point 1. That's a very clear argument. But I would argue he's focal point 1. Not that it matters. I mean, you're going to go to either one. You're going to go like this. You're going to go like this. It's going to be, he's going to want to look at both. And it's incredible. This is eye flow to me. This is a way to grab your attention and then keep you in my picture. Oh, back and forth. So much tension there. And it adds to the emotion of the story. Then I would argue focal point 2 is his hands. And then, it just goes all over the place. You want to look at this oval. Yeah, it's gorgeous. So let's just say 1, 2, 3. And as we saw earlier, right? We saw earlier that these hands are at this intersection. That's not an accident. This strong vertical is no accident. Strong vertical is no accident. The strong horizontal is no accident. The strong triangle is no accident. That's why, to me, these hands are clearly a focal much pointing to it. This points to it. This points to it. This clearly points to it. This intersection. An intersection is a powerful, powerful visual device. I mean, you could make an argument that the hand could be read number 1, focal point 1, but he clearly doesn't want you to do that because he puts the hand in shadow, puts very little detail. Look at that, very little detail in painting, but on the faces, obviously, puts much more care. Look at the care he puts on her hand. My God, look at that. Look at that. I wish I had a larger res image. So, this clearly demonstrates the cat, strong geometry, rectangles and ovals, eye flow, focal points, and beautiful asymmetry. And this is the genius of this painting, is because it actually is symmetrical in design. It's, remember what I talked about earlier? I said, hey, don't do too perfect 40 minutes ago. Don't do this because it's bad. We all know that symmetrical is bad. We all know that 4 even squares is very bad. We all know that. But Dean Cornwell is like, you know what? I am Dean Cornwell, son. I can do whatever I want. I'm Dean Cornwell, son. And I can cut my image in half. I can make 4 even quadrants because I'm Dean Cornwell. And this is not an accident. And I believe, remember I said there is a type of perfect horizontals and perfect verticals. And this is an example of it because symmetry creates an incredible, one advantage of symmetry is it's very balanced. It's very, it creates a strong foundation. If you want to build a house, you want to build a building, anything, any structure, you want symmetry. In the man-made world, you want symmetry, but in the subjective world of painting and art and emotion, You generally don't want asymmetry, but he's like, you know what? I'm going to build my construct on a solid foundation of symmetry of basically four even boxes. And he even pushed it to the limit. He said, in fact, I'm going to remind you, hey, I'm using boxes. I'm using symmetry. Hey, look at my symmetry. I'm Dean Cornwell. I'm Dean Cornwell. Even the circle, right? Perfect symmetrical circle repeating itself. So this is an example how he used symmetry in construct, but he used asymmetry in design. So look at, right, remember the ovals, asymmetry. 2 ovals here, 0 here. Big white triangle here, no white triangle here. Big white bed here, nothing here. It's basically dark. Even the top quadrant, he said, the top quadrant, I'm going to make it very bright. Mostly bright at the top quadrant, the bottom very, very dark. And even he just said, you know what, I need this element for 2 reasons. One, it serves as counterbalance, as asymmetry for my left, and as an angle to lead you back into the eye. So he's forcing you to come back into his picture with these angles. So that's a wonderful. That's why I can look in Cornwell all day. I never get tired of looking at Dean Cornwell. I always learn something new. Look at Dean Cornwell and Wyeth, pretty much anyone from that tradition, Howard Pyle. Okay, so let me just quickly do. Let's quickly look at photography, and I'll give you guys some names. You may have known these photographers. You may not. These are some of my favorite photographers because just like me and just like this Dean Cornwell, they design with the exact same constructs that I use. Basically, rectangles, huge rectangles, or occasional triangles and ovals, but they're very obvious. They use very geometry. They use very clear and obvious focal points, and they use very clear, asymmetry and eye flow. Look at this. Oh my goodness. Oh, come on, Instagram. Let's look at IG Haro-chan. Where is it? _ Haru-chan. Yeah, that's right. Oh, here we go. Comment below if you follow photographers. I'm sure we all follow photographers. Below, what are some of your favorite photographers on Instagram? Share with us your collective pool of knowledge. Let's look at this. Look at this. This just makes me so happy. This just makes me so happy. I go, oh my God. It speaks to my soul because this is exactly how. Oh my God, come on. Tools, flip horizontal. This speaks to my soul because it just is exactly how oops. And this is, I know it's not a full landscape, but when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, it's gorgeous. All right. Okay. Question number one. Is my image asymmetrical? And how is it asymmetrical? I think we can clearly see little girl. An example. This is an example of a very strong rectangular design. This is just a stunning picture. God, I wish I could photograph like this. My God. Look, I mean, that's a Dean Cornwell. That's exactly what we looked at. Two powerful rectangles on either side. Well, it's three if you count the middle. Is it asymmetrical? Asymmetrical. Yes. What's making it asymmetrical? Of course, the little girl. Little girl on one side, no little girl on the other side. Boom. You got asymmetry. And that's all it takes. That is just stunning. And, not just the figure, but its color. Look at that pink color here. No pink color here. Light here. Shadows here. That is just stunning photography. My God. Focal point. What's my focal point? What's the eye flow? It's tough, right? Girl is focal point 1, but because she is not in she's not in focus. She's out of focus. I would argue that the focal point is the woman, foreground woman. Foreground woman is not only in focus, she's very sharp, but she's wearing very, very nice, rich, saturated red. Now, this little girl, that pink is very saturated too, but this red is very strong, and it's because, as human beings, we quickly scan images for other human beings and faces and hands. This one we scan, we see a shape. It looks like a little girl, but it's so blurry. We can relate. When I look at this, I relate to this more because it's a human being. They're both human beings, but this one is in focus and it's bigger and it's closer. So I would argue that's read 1. Obviously, the girl has to be read 2. And this is there. This image gets us there, right? He gets us there with a straight up arrow. Look here. And then look here. Tree. Look at the tree. The tree is generally arrow shaped. And these shadow shapes lead us back. Where would read 3 be? I would argue read 3 is here. This big patch of thing. But, your eye will flow naturally. But clearly, these two are the most dominant things. There's lots of ways you can go from here back to our main character. Main character leads you this way. All sorts of beautiful eye movement here. And this is in photography. So this is stunning. And there was one last point I wanted to make about this picture. Where's my notes here? Oh, contrast. Oh, okay. There's one last point I wanted to make, and it's the idea of contrast. Now, remember, this is a clear rectangular design, right? Things that I recommend and that I look for and I recommend for new artists is to try to compose with obvious rectangles. To start. Now these clearly aren't rectangles. They move. They're right. She's close though. Look at that. That's very close for a rectangle. But and this woman, this in the kimono here, clearly it's not a perfect rectangle, but we have strong rectangles, and we have strong rectangles. We have strong rectangles. Boom, 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 boom. Where, just like Dean Cornwell, is there contrast in shape? Do you guys see it? Comment below. Where is there contrast in shape? Comment below. I think we can all see it now. It's the pattern. Incredible pattern. My God. This photograph is just mind-numbing. It's almost like it's like an illustration. It's like he look at this. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. What a photograph. Look at that. Could he have planned this? I don't know. Maybe he staged it. Wow. Cinematographers stage it, for sure. The great cinematographers, people, pictures. Look at that. Incredible. And obviously the other one are these subtle triangles. You could argue these are ovals too. And leaves triangles. So wonderful use of contrast, asymmetry, rectangles, excuse me, and spectacular photograph, my God. So IG Haruchan. Let's look at one more here. I like this person, Typhon Fidi. He does, I believe he's based in Hong Kong. Look at this. You guys see that? God, it's gorgeous. Curves and rectangles. Find some that are I have a folder. Some of his work. Let's see. Look at that. There's no doubt. What is the main compositional design? That is a hard rectangle. No doubt there. Well, these dense urbans are obviously going to rely heavily on rectangles. But you know what's, well, I'll get to that in a second. All right. The obvious pattern is a hard rectangle. This creates a very sharp angle, so that forces your eye to look here. So that tells me that this is the clear focal point. It's in this zone. This is without a doubt your first read. This zone. Just beautiful use of rectangles everywhere. This is rectangle at an angle, but still rectangle in my eyes. Now, is there contrast in shape while we're on rectangles? In the urban environment, typically, yes. Here he just uses, the available street sign, And this one, I would argue, is also a nice contrasting shape, the tip of that thing. And clear eye flow. I mean, we can spend all day on the eye flow here. The anything that's drawn in perspective will have will force you to go to the vanishing point. Will be so yeah. Like I said, the focal point has to be here. And then clear lines go up, clear lines go radiate out. Let's look at one more photographer. Let's see if I can find one. Is this right? Nick L.A. N-I-K-K. Oh, N-A-L-A. Okay, this is him. Wow. Oh, Jesus. Wow. Oh my goodness, look at this. Oh, why you do that? Damn it. Oh, damn it. Why does it do that? Okay, I'm just going to grab one. First one that grabs my eye, we'll analyze it. Oh, wow. Stunning. Stunning. Let's just look at this one. This is basically a city. These trees are basically exactly like we saw with the urban one. Let me see if I can find one that's not so vertical. Let's look at a horizontal. Okay, here's one. Perfect. This one's perfect. This one's more of a horizontal. Is that? Ah, damn it. Forgot about that. All right. Asymmetry now. This one, the horizon line is here, I believe, but because the buildings kind of end at this hard rectangle, so this image is cut in half. That's what attracted me to it. Because one of the ways, you can innovate in art is to break rules. We all know that the great artists all break rules. All the movements of the past broke the rules of the current, whatever it's the established orthodox, the comfortable patterns of art. The great ones come in and break the rules. And one of the rules we all know is don't cut your damn picture in half, right? Just like Dean Cornwell said, no, I can do it. I can break that rule. Look at this. He just cuts this picture straight in half. Or at least this composition straight in half. I think that's what attracted. But there's a clear asymmetry. Obviously, the bottom is man-made, the top is nature. The bottom is squares, the top is organic, hard versus soft, rectangle versus curved. There's lots of counterbalance happening. So even though he cut this image in, there's a clear and beautiful counterbalance that he's able to establish, even though structurally it's cut in half. So that's wonderful use. But again, the clear rectangle. To me, in this picture, there's basically 3 rectangles, the top, the bottom, and the middle. So clear rectangular design, clear use of the rule of thirds, which is basically way to design with rectangles, basically, rule of thirds. Focal point, eye flow. That's clearly number 1, or the sun. It's around here. Leads you down, radiates out into the city, moves you. So this could probably be 2 or 3, moves you back around. So all this busyness of the city naturally moves you around. The clouds, curve, nice contrast there. Contrast of shape, right? You have the hard rectangle, 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 and then he's like, curve, triangle. That's incredible. And all of this creates asymmetry, has to use counterbalance, right? Okay, so there's looking at photography. I think I'm going to cut out here. And if you guys want to practice, what I would do is take 10 paintings by Edgar Payne, 10 paintings by Dean Cornwell, and 10 landscape photographs like this. They could be, I would mix it up, urban and natural, urban versus natural, outdoor. And do an analysis like this. Find out, first of all, look for hard, obvious rectangles. If you can't find rectangles, next look for obvious triangles. Look for the clear focal point, identical point. Number 1 and number 2 is, and then look for contrast in shape. So if my image is mostly rectangles, where are the curves? Where are the ovals? If my image is mostly triangles, where are the curves? If mostly straights, where are the curves? And then try to find the path of the eye flow. And eye flow comes with contrast. For example, this one, there's a clear, if you want to know how to find eye flow, look for areas of contrast. So there's clear contrast here. Light shapes against dark. Clear contrast here. These like tree little shapes against all this city, and they're like dark brown against warm oranges. So contrast, contrast, contrast. Line, and any angle creates an arrow. Any line creates an arrow. Any hard line creates an arrow. So like this is a hard line. So that could be arrow down, these horizontals, arrow left to right. So all of those can be used as eye flow devices. Now, depending on how contrasty they are, how sharp and noticeable they are, that's how strong the eye flow is. So for me, these are very strong indicators that I want you to start here and then boop, 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 follow the little trail of things, of my dark patches. I can go here, right? You can even, lead the eye this way, right? If this were a painting, you could put something here, but it's a photograph, If this was a painting, you would put something there to lead the eye there. Boop, boop. And this is coming back to why this is important, is because you start to see the world in this way, you can easily put it in your work. So this is just the beginning of a much longer. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about specific exercises. The questions here. Thank you for joining me live. I'm just going to quickly, if I don't get to your question today. Ray name says, is the page from a book? Yes, Edgar Payne's Composition for Painters, I think it's called. Edgar Payne, Composition for Painters. Let's look at that book. I used to have this book, but a friend of mine actually borrowed it and never gave it back. Oh my God. Comment below. If you ever had a friend borrow one of your art books and not given it back, comment below. Am I the only one? My God, that's happened twice actually. And I don't own many art books either. Dang it. At least now, for sure, now I don't. Edgar Payne, Composition of Outdoor Painting. Excellent book. It's, in my mind, it's very hard to read. It's very hard to read for me. Maybe if someone here has read it, comment if you have read this book. I found it very difficult to. But damn, that man can paint. So that's why me, who can break down his paintings, who can look at his notes and go, oh, okay, this is what he's trying to say. Visual pad. Is it digital artist? Yes. Would Rembrandt have invented these folds and markers? Yes. Life photographer would stage the props correct. Somehow look at the hands. Hello from Philippines. Yeah, ¿cómo está? Wow. I believe you're the first Filipino commenter. Thank you for joining me. Well, it's very late for you. Nimanja made a good comment. There's nothing special about the shoulder, but it's just there for the triangle. Yeah. Yes. It's the unescapable construct of portraits. Any tips how we study composition? Yes, I'll get to that. Today, I would say today do tracings. This kind of composition starting with line instead of what idea seen actually done. Yes, Anchana said, yeah, I do it all the time. I mean, I can't be the only one. Carlos says line is faster if brain understand. Yep. Carlos made a great comment. You start with line and rectangles, but then you transform it. You change it a little bit to create to make it art. Comment, Carlos. Thank you. Mr. Chin says, I look for composition in nature. That's what Da Vinci did, yes. Triangle, finding void. Distance between two parallel sides. Hello from Brazil. The stripe on his pants is interesting. Yes. That could be a triangle. Seeing. Okay, because there is uneven balance in the background. Yes, to me, the shadows and foliage make the eye go to little girl. I recommend stuff. No anymore. Yes, thank you. Carlos made some great comments. Yeah, I would look at Edgar Payne and do geometric analysis. Basically, try to find the geometric lines. They're most likely going to be triangles and rectangles. And when you look at photography, you can start with these guys. If you don't currently follow photographers, I like this guy, Nick, NIKK_LA, and Typhon, where is he? Where'd he go? Typhon Graffiti. I can't find him now. Oh, here he is. Typhoon Photography. And once you like one person on Instagram, you'll get suggestions of photographers like them. The reason why I picked him out is because he uses clear rectangular design. So does this other person, IG Haru-chan. Oh, come on. All right, so thank you for joining me for now. And tomorrow we'll continue this talk on composition and go through some compositional exercises. So that'll be helpful if you want to help, go through some different examples, and we'll break it down. And it'll be at the same time tomorrow at 9 a.m. If you're brand new to me, if you're watching on replay, subscribe to my email list at drawwithchris.com/subscribe, and I do most of my communication by email. So I send all the stream links and any schedule changes. For now, there won't be any schedule changes, but if there are, all by email. So thank you all for joining me. Those of you watching live, and thank you for those watching replay. I appreciate it. And I will see you guys. Take care.